cinematic universe. 15 years ago, no one would have predicted that this formula would change the face of cinema as we know it. It also propelled an actor that fledgling Marvel Studios took a chance on after he had a less than flattering public image years before. However, this gamble not only paid off for the studio, but it would also launch the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we know it today, and it made a household name out of one of the most giving and respected actors in Hollywood, Robert Downey Jr. This movie was Iron Man. Before the Avengers, Captain America, the Black Panther, bringing Spider-Man in, and an underrated Hulk reboot, Iron Man started out as possibly one of the last standalone superhero movies, whereas the X-Men, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, and Hulk all existed in their own separate universes courtesy of when Marvel sold off the movie rights in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The movie rights to Iron Man had previously been at New Line Cinema and 20th Century Fox, where we could have seen Tom Cruise as Tony Stark and even Nicolas Cage. Personally, I would have been intrigued to see what that could have looked like. So, after 15 years, does the Mark III suit still have the shine? Well, let's get back into the suit as we revisit Iron Man. Tony Stark, genius, playboy, billionaire, philanthropist. Stark is to the Marvel world as Brains is to Thunderbirds, a very eccentric-minded inventor that creates tech that people can't even begin to imagine. The movie does a great job of portraying Tony Stark as a lovable rogue. There are things he does that are questionable, but there is something charming about how he does it.
Is it true you went 12 for 12 with last year's maximum cover models?
That is an excellent question. Yes and no. March and I had a scheduling conflict, but fortunately the Christmas cover was twins.
That's not something he would say past this movie. When you get to Iron Man 2, you'll see why. The origin of Iron Man stays very true to the comic origin, where Stark is wounded out in the field testing the very weapons he invented and has a device implanted in his chest to stop even further damage to his heart by keeping the remaining shrapnel from entering his atrial septum. The only difference is that Vietnam is swapped out for Afghanistan, and in the context of 2008 at the time, this was appropriate and contemporary with what was going on in the world. That and Jon Favreau did not want to do a period piece with a movie that would have been set in the 70s. Stark is a man that seemingly has everything. Money, charm, wit, cars, great house, an awesome basement garage lab that most people would love to have, and an AI system that assists him around the house. I think when you're humbled in the manner that he had been, it makes you rethink your world perspective. Are we doing enough to protect the people around the world, and what can we do to affect change? Enter the mini-arc reactor and the first of 3 Iron Man suits. The first suit was made in a cave from a box of scraps, and it was only meant to be a one-shot deal, just a means of him escaping with Yinsen, who had saved his life earlier. In terms of tech, it's very low, compared to the more refined and sophisticated suits in later movies that would even make the Mark III suit in this movie look obsolete. That's the thing that Stark is about with his tech. He is always refining it, making revisions to iron out flaws with not only the arc reactors, but also the suits. If we look at the test flight of the Mark II, we witness that it's vulnerable to icing up in the higher atmosphere, and then switches the components to gold titanium alloy that they use on satellites to maintain fuselage integrity while power to weight ratio. During this, we see the reference to the gold suit in the comics before he settles on the iconic golden red suit with a little hot rod red from the 1930 Ford delivery. The most rewarding part of the movie is him leading up to becoming Iron Man, in a similar vein to where you witness Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker learning to be Spider-Man and the gradual progression of Bruce Wayne to Batman in Batman Begins. It's just seeing the trial and error with what works for the suit and the interactions between Tony and his robot assistants. One real cute moment is where the robot he nicknamed Dummy hands him his original arc reactor chess piece after Obadiah had stolen his more upgraded piece, and that his robot actually looked out for him.
Good boy.
Now the parts that no one wants to hear. Obadiah is really underdeveloped as the Ironmonger, with essentially an upgraded version of the Mark I suit on steroids, like he had been taking Python packs from Hulk Hogan in the 80s. Also, how did he learn how to pilot the suit so quick? And the fight. Ugh. While it's amazing to watch, it's just that the movie could have included more of these fights, as the only ones that Stark had been in was the fight to escape the cave he was held captive in, and the various militants he cashed some receipts on the 10 rings out of respect for Yinsen, and then took the group and left the citizens to do as they saw fit with their captors, and then the escape from the F-22 Raptors and then saving the pilot. Now, I'll grant the writing this. It adds an edge and tension to have the hero come in at a disadvantage with a chess piece that was not designed for sustained flight, as Stark was losing more power than Kimberly from Season 3 of Power Rangers.
Or the daily use of a smartphone.
I think those are the only major critiques that let the movie down a few points. While I still think this is the best Iron Man movie in this series and the best MCU movie overall, my opinion, I just think if they had more screen time with the Ironmonger and not have Stane's heel turn come out of left field near the third act, it would have made this even better. Now, I'm going to end the writing on a positive note. This is how you end the movie like a badass.
Truth is, I am Iron Man.
Before Robert was cast as the titular character, I don't think anyone could have visualized him as Iron Man, and after seeing him as Tony Stark, it would feel wrong not to see him as Iron Man. He brings out a lot of charm to essentially the character that was at the ground floor of the MCU. His lovable snark is what made him a perfect fit as the engineer weapons inventor that would help turn a C-list superhero into an A-lister overnight. What I find rewarding about Robert's performance is someone that's basically a lovable rogue that takes his gifts as an inventor for granted and not seeing the carnage that the weapons he made to protect soldiers is being used against them. In a way, this was almost a redemption arc, as you see a man that has seen what he has created being misused, and he decides to correct this mistake by going after the people doing double dealing under the table with the aid of his Iron Man suit. There is still that roguish charm to him, but now it's being led by a moral compass. Many cite this role as the beginning of the biggest comeback in Hollywood when you consider that he had a fall from grace in admitting to substance abuse, doing time, and then slowly getting his foot back in the door with small roles here and there, one of which was miming out to Elton John's I Want Love, which was essentially done on his lunch hour break in prison. It was Mel Gibson who got him his first major role after rehab in The Singing Detective, as Mel saw the potential in redemption for him, a favour that Robert would return later in life after Mel had his own brush with the law. Small bit of trivia here. The scene in which he has cheeseburgers is an unintentional reference to what made him quit drugs. He had a cheeseburger where he was so high that he was not able to enjoy it. So, he dumped his supply into the ocean and decided to go to rehab. And here are some of his best zingers.
Is it better to be feared or respected? And I say, is it too much to ask for both? That's how Dad did it. That's how America does it. And it's worked out pretty well so far.
Hey, Tony. Remember me?
Sure don't.
You ever lose knowledge sleep your whole life?
Be prepared to lose a few with you.
What's going on here?
Let's face it, this is not the worst thing you've caught me doing.
RDJ is to Tony Stark as Michael Keaton is to Batman. Perfect.
Behind every great leading man, there is a great leading woman, and this is very much the case with Gwyneth Paltrow. Iron Man is not necessarily a movie I would have expected her to do when she has a resume like Great Expectations and Shakespeare in Love. And yet after seeing her as Pepper, it would feel wrong to have someone else play her in this movie. Even RDJ said to her jokingly, "Wouldn't you want to be in a movie that everyone would go watch?"
And they wonder why the lines between RDJ and Tony Stark are blurred. Although that said, Pepper Potts has her own sass.
After all these years, Tony still has you picking up the dry cleaning.
I do anything and everything that Mr. Stark requires, including occasionally taking out the trash.
Ah, the original roadie. Howard takes on the role of Stark's childhood friend as the weapons advisor and liaison to Stark Industries. I like to think of Rhodey as Stark's conscience in an odd way. He tries to get Tony to try and take responsibility, even when they're on the plane ride over to Afghanistan, and Rhodey takes exception to the fact that Tony doesn't respect himself and opposes the idea of having hot sake on the ride over. Cut to the next scene and they're chilling on the floor to sake while the flight attendants act as entertainment, even with a dance pole.
Oh, that one moment has not aged well in this movie. Including this line.
I don't want to see this on your MySpace page.
MySpace? Dude! No one uses MySpace! Well, maybe the odd few.
You know him as Flynn from Tron, the dude from The Big Lebowski, and in this movie he was a member of Iron Man's Rogue Gallery in The Ironmonger. I will give the writing a lot of credibility, and to Bridges himself, no one saw the heel turn coming. But that said, that's natural to think that if you never read the comics where Stane was the first villain for Iron Man. You see Stane acting in Tony's and the company's best interests, as it's only when you see him meeting with the Ten Rings that you saw who ordered the hit on the prodigy of Stark Industries. Bridges plays his part well as the antagonist. My only critique with the Ironmonger aspect of his role is that it suffered from the same problem with Spider-Man 3 a year before. They shoehorned the villain in at the last act with no real time to build Ironmonger up. Thankfully, this is something that was corrected when they had Ivan Vanko go up against Tony Stark in Iron Man 2 2 years later. Tobe plays the man who essentially saved Stark's life by grafting an electromagnet to his chest to stop the remaining shrapnel from entering his heart courtesy of the explosion left by one of his own missiles. Yinsen is eager to help Stark as he wants to get out of the cave as much as he did, and the two form this camaraderie where Yinsen is marveled at the very creation of the mini-arc reactor that Stark would use to make him more mobile and not depend on the car battery for the magnet in his chest. Yinsen is extremely likable and he just seems like a nice guy. I found his advice poignant and moving on his deathbed.
Thank you for saving me.
Don't waste your life.
And he didn't. 11 years later, he saved the universe. Literally. This movie began the trend of after-credit scenes in movies that would effectively tell the audience what was either next or what was coming down the line. In this, we see Sam perfectly decked out in a leather jacket and the iconic eye patch portraying the 21st century take on Nick Fury that had been seen in the Ultimate Avengers comics. And even though Sam has mere seconds to make this scene count, make it count he did. He established his presence, authority, and objective within the MCU with this one simple line.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
Favreau enlisted the help of ILM for most of the visual effects for the theatrical debut of Iron Man, along with the orphanage and the embassy for additional VFX.
Just a friendly reminder, folks, visual effects and special effects are not the same. Visual effects are done in post-production, whereas special effects are done on set at the time, from anything to miniatures to explosions and other stuff that's done whilst on set. They are not to be confused with each other.
At this point in 2008, ILM had pretty much nailed photorealism or were very close to doing so. If 2007's Spider-Man 3 was any indication that CG for superhero movies had gotten way more sophisticated than previous years, when you see the Mark II and III suits taking off, you buy the photorealism. They filmed skydivers in a wind tunnel to study the physics of what it would be like for someone to be like Iron Man, but in a real way. So when you see Stark having the euphoric facial expressions when he's test piloting the Mark II, you can get the sense of that's what it would be like. They would actually have RDJ in a suit with the helmet, but because he had the lights in front of his eyes, it made it difficult for him to see. In future sequels, they have him in a capture suit and then superimpose the helmet over his face, so at the very least he could see where he was going. The Mark I suit is practical, and some of the stunt actors, even though they were in top physical condition, really struggled with wearing it and ended up paying the price for it later with muscle strains. The Mark II and III suits, when the actors and stunt actors were just walking around, would essentially be plastic suits, but then have the VFX crew airbrush the CG on to make it more metallic and shiny. The Mark III suit up is a visual spectacle itself, as it shows a very practical and believable way that Tony would be sewn into the suit.
And the effects? Oh yeah, they still hold up.
Composer Ramin Djawadi was a childhood fan of the character, so for him this was birthdays, Christmas, and New Year's Eve all come at once. He treated Tony Stark more like a rock star movie star, as Tony Stark is not your average traditional superhero, as there was a big presence of heavy metal and guitars throughout the movie. There's even a grander version of the 1966 Iron Man animated series theme when Stark and company are at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. This is similar to what would be done with the Spider-Man theme to Homecoming in 2017. I think the music that really works the best is where Tony is test flying the Mark II suit and the score reflects the euphoria that Tony is experiencing in being able to fly for the first time.
Kind of like a dream.
Oh, and the kids he flies by at the fairground, the boy's supposed to be Spider-Man.
The score was done to perfection.
Iron Man grossed a profit of $585.8 million against a budget of $140 million. In 2023, that would be worth $827.7 million. The movie took in $98.6 million across 4,105 theaters in the US and Canada in its opening weekend, sending it straight to number 1 at the box office. Todd McCarthy of Variety called the film an expansively entertaining special effects extravaganza with fresh energy and stylistic polish. Kirk Honeycutt of The Hollywood Reporter praised the film, while nonetheless finding disappointment in the climatic battle between different Iron Man prototypes. How did Tony's nemesis learn how to use the suit? Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 4 out of 4 stars, praising Downey Jr.'s performance and stating, "At the end of the day, it's Robert Downey Jr. who powers the liftoff, separating this from most other superhero movies." Garth Franklin of Dark Horizons commended the impressive sets and mechanics that combine smoothly with relatively seamless CG and said, "Robert Downey Jr. along with director Jon Favreau helped this rise above formula. The result is something that, whilst hardly original or groundbreaking, is nevertheless refreshing in its earnestness to avoid dark dramatic stylings in favour of an easygoing crowd-pleasing action movie with a sprinkle of anti-war and redemption themes." Iron Man 2 followed in 2010, and then by Stark teaming up with Captain America, Thor, the Incredible Hulk, Black Widow and Hawkeye for 2012's The Avengers. A third Iron Man followed in early summer of 2013 that completed the Iron Man trilogy. RDJ would appear as Tony Stark Iron Man in 3 more Avengers sequels and 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming, before bowing it out in style in 2019's Avengers 4 Endgame.
The movie has been enjoyed since 2008 on DVD, Blu-ray and 4K. I'm MG Knight, and this was Iron Man.